Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bande Touche. Before we start, let's have a quick show of hands. How many of you here have a will? Well, you are in for a treat because Frank Carroll is here to talk about the importance and the necessity to have a will. I have personally learned a lot from Frank at my workplace, and I'm confident you will learn a few things from his presence on our program tonight. Frank is a highly respected lawyer with years of experience. He will be sharing valuable insight with us on the importance of having a will and how to easily draw one up. Let's give Frank a warm welcome.
It's my
Hello,
absolute
Frank,
pleasure, my
and
friend.
thank you for joining us tonight. Now, will you please tell us about yourself?
Okay, I joined the military at 17. I was a clearance diver with the Navy. I did that for 15 years. I broke my back in a parachuting accident in 1995 after I just got back from Rwanda. I was in Rwanda for 12 months as part of the peacekeeping force over there. When I broke my back, I wasn't able to dive anymore. So the military offered me the opportunity to go to uni. I had done pretty well at high school, so they offered me. Well, I sat the GAMSAT for medicine, so they offered me medicine or law, and I wasn't sure which one I wanted to do. So I got a senior officer, and I said, "What one's going to get me to war the quickest?" And he said, "A lawyer." So I said, "Okay, I'll be a lawyer." Because that's what got you back in the fight quicker than being a doctor. So I went and studied law down in Melbourne, was a military lawyer for another 25 years straight after that. Then I started my own practice in Melbourne, which is still going. I'm still back in the military, but I have people running my practice in Melbourne. And wills is one of the many things that we do. So it gives me great pleasure tonight to be able to talk to you about why you should have a will and the disadvantages of not having one.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Now, what is a will in Australia?
A will in Australia is a legal document where you um, instruct certain things to happen after your death. And the certain things that are normally in a will is how your assets are to be disposed of, how your body is to be disposed of, whether you're an organ donor or something like that, how you wish to be buried or cremated. So it's really an outline of your wishes on a number of things. How you want your assets to be dispersed once you've passed away, how you want your body to be dealt with, um, and any other special events that you would like to occur. So that pretty much encompasses what a will is.
Okay, thank you. Now, what makes a will valid?
For a will to be valid, it has to be the original will. So you can't produce a photocopy of a will and try and get probate. I'll go back. I'll go back a step, Vince.
Okay,
Once someone passes away, and I can tell from practical experience, I got notification this afternoon that a cousin of mine uh, passed away on Friday. He drowned diving in Tasmania. And I only found out this afternoon. Now, I am the executor of his will. So there are now certain obligations on me once I come into possession of the death certificate. Um, and uh, and the uh, requirements of me as the executor, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, is to make sure that probate's applied for, which is a court process where the death is advertised and it gives anybody the opportunity to contest the will. And what I mean by that is there might be uh, a child that was born out of a
okay,
extramarital affair.
Frank, sorry to interrupt you. We're going to talk about that later on, about the executive of the will. Okay,
Yes.
when we get there, at the moment, we just want to know what makes a will valid as far as the
What
law
what
is
makes
concerned.
what makes a will valid is that it is signed by the person who is making the will and two witnesses, all at the same time, all in the same place, or with the same pen.
Okay, now let's talk about someone like let's say me. I don't have a will, right? And I decide to have one done. Okay, where do I start? Let's say I want to do at home. I mean, I've heard that you just get a piece of paper and just write, whatever you want on a piece of paper. As long as are you saying that as long as you have three witnesses, is the will is valid?
As long as the two, so a will needs two witnesses. All right, it needs the person who owns the will, they sign it, and it has to be witnessed. That signature has to be witnessed at the same time by two other people.
So that's
Now,
what you're saying. If I get a piece of paper now and I write that, if in the event I pass away, I want my son to whatever to have my house on a piece of
yes,
paper. I just get two friends to come and to witness and sign.
to witness the same, but you have to say this is my will.
Okay, this
So
is my
the
will, and
word
that becomes valid. That piece of paper is
that is
valid.
a, it can be done on a piece of toilet paper as long as it has that this is my will and
Hmm.
you this is my will of uh, whatever your full name is,
Yeah, yeah.
and you detail what it is that you want, and that it
Hmm.
is witnessed and dated
Yes.
by two people at the same time that have witnessed you signing it.
And that piece of paper is valid and is valid.
That is a valid will.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Now,
Now, I
who?
suggest that you don't use a piece of toilet paper to do your will
Okay.
on.
Okay. Thank you. Now, before we talk about what you can leave in your assets, apparently there's this basic will kit you can get from the post office. Can you please tell us about that one?
Um, it is a very basic will. It is also a will that people make a lot of mistakes on because they haven't actually done a will before.
Hmm.
Um, Now, I'm not just drumming up business for lawyers,
Yeah.
but um, the safest place to have a will done is with a lawyer, and I say that for a number of reasons. The first one is it's a lawyer's bread and butter as to how to do a will. Okay, so they're not likely to miss any of the important things. Um, and the important things can be, let's just say you have a family trust,
Yeah. Okay.
which a number of people do have because they put their assets into a trust for tax purposes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, now you're not going to be able to articulate that or to explain that properly in a will from the post office.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so things that can be a little bit complicated, particularly if you have children from another marriage,
Hmm.
and so there can be competing interests. Um, it's very wise to use the services of a will. Now, depending on how complex the will is, I mean, if you own a business, it becomes even more complex because things will have to happen with the business. If you have a business partner, then
Hmm.
there should always be an agreement, which isn't a will, an agreement between the partners as to what's happened. But if for some reason there isn't an agreement, then the deceased's share in that business has to be dealt with some way, in some
Okay.
way.
Okay. Thank you
Okay,
very
and
much.
it would be dealt with in the will, and a solicitor would be able to do that for you.
So what you're saying is, depending on your situation, like someone with single, like a average Joe who hasn't got a house, maybe he's renting, he's got his car, and he hasn't got much assets. That really cute will do.
If you were a single person, were paying off a house, or even if you didn't have a house and all you owned was your car, a will from the post office would be fine. But
Okay.
the minute that you got married or entered into a long-term relationship or had a child or bought a house or something there was a significant change in the circumstances in your life,
Mhm.
you would go and have your will updated by a lawyer.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. Now, who can you leave your wills assets to, or your asset to?
You can leave your assets to whoever you want, and it doesn't have to be a particular person. I've been the executor of wills where people have left millions of dollars to the Lost Dogs Home in Melbourne. So they haven't had any family, or if they had family, they chose specifically not to leave anything to someone. Okay, so they've left it to a charity. You can do that. You can leave your assets to anybody that you wish. Now, if you're married, a normal husband and wife will, even with children, generally works like this. The husband, the husband will draft his will. The wife will be the executor, and I'll move on to what that means in a minute.
Now we
And
talk about later on. Yeah, continue.
yeah, we'll go back to the role of the executor later on. But the
Hmm.
husband will, so we'll do the husband's will. He leaves the wife as the executor, and he leaves everything to the wife. So
Okay.
the children aren't even mentioned in the will at that stage, unless there's a specific paragraph put in there, which I generally do put in if something happens to both parents at the same time. So in other words, if the parents were in the same car crash and both died, what happens to the children? So I put in what we call a guardianship clause, where you tell me who you want to be the guardian for your children until they turn the legal age,
Okay.
and at what age do you want your children to receive their inheritance or their benefit, whatever you're going to leave them.
Hmm.
Now, you can leave a child, you can leave your children an asset, and it only becomes, it only gets transferred to them at a particular age. So let's just say, and that's anyone over 18. So let's just say you had a child that was 18, was struggling socially, wasn't good with money, may or may not have experimented with drugs. You just weren't sure how things were going to turn out. You might say that child will become eligible for that asset at 25, at the age of 25, or even at the age of 30.
Okay.
So they don't automatically have to get the inheritance at any particular time. As long as they're over 18, you can choose what they get and when they get it. You also, if they're under 18, you also choose who that guardian would be. Now, that's a discussion that you and your wife, you and your partner would have
Okay.
before you drafted your will. Now, we would then do the wife's will, and the wife's will would be exactly the opposite to the husband's. So the husband would be the executor, and then everything else underneath would be the same. So we call them mirror wills. So they mirror each other.
Okay. Thank you very
If
much,
that
Frank. Okay, no,
if
that's
that
very
makes
clear.
sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, Frank. Now, I understand that some of us here don't have a will. Now, what happens usually when someone dies? What's the procedure? Like if the Joe bloke just drops, he has a house, he has a car. And as far as the law is concerned, what's the first thing that happens then?